All right, well, let's get started. Hello and welcome, everybody. Today's topic is an exciting one. Welcome to the 2025 Identity Trends and Forecast for the year ahead. What's taking center stage in research and education? We appreciate you being here today for our IAM Online, the monthly webinar focused on identity and access management, brought to you by InCommon and Internet 2. My name is Jean Horszewski. I am the InCommon Academy Director, and I will be your host today. So we're gonna get right to it because we have a lot in store. We have many speakers today who are going to be sharing a lot of trends and insights with you. So we're gonna be having all of our speakers go through their topics. So we want you to ask questions, and if you have them, please use the Zoom Q&A function. You know that you're there if you hover over your lower portion of your screen to the Q&A piece. So please do submit your questions along the way. We'll be taking those at the end. If you want to post a chat message for everyone to see, please feel free to do that in the Zoom chat. Be sure that you do the little drop down to select everyone and not just the host, so that everyone can see what you're saying. And I know a lot of you asked, we will be recording this webinar, and we will be sending you a link afterward as well. So don't worry if you wanted to see it again a little bit later. So we're very excited, and without further ado, I'm going to pass the virtual mic over to James Crampton, our Trust and Identity Industry Relationship Manager at Internet 2, and he's going to introduce today's speakers and exciting topic. James, please take it away.
Thank you, Jean. Yeah, I'm excited today to have our hosts here to talk with us about their experiences as catalysts. Now, our catalyst speakers today come from 6 of the 12 catalyst partners. These are trusted vendors in identity and access management for higher ed. And we get to hear their experiences and their perspectives on the year ahead. We're going to start out with Paul Spaulding from Unicon, who will bring us leadership perspectives in the higher ed C-suite.
Thank you and welcome. So leadership perspectives, we took a host of C-level and actually IAM level directors and others, and just took the last few years and our experiences and kind of came away, and even technology exchange conferences, we came away with some clear trends and challenges. And this is summed up with this slide, but the next slide here really will go over the challenges that I want to cover. And I think more so after the COVID pandemic, but also just in general, we've seen a staff turnover, loss of IAM personnel, personnel retiring, domain expertise maybe not at the range it used to be. There's people that worked with this software for over 20 years or this domain for 20 years that have retired, and you lose those people. That changes the dynamic at your university quite a bit. So we're seeing a whole host of workforce and expertise challenges out there in the market, and really getting that new younger generation up into the IAM sphere, as it were. So there's a lot of challenges here, and they're not unique to higher education. Corporate world is also experiencing this. But this is probably one of the biggest things affecting IAM departments and C-level at universities today. On top of that, we have budget constraints and financial pressures. So after COVID, a lot of enrollment started declining, budgets as a result declined, but there's other reasons too. Security has grown, ransomware attacks have grown, social engineering and other sorts of phishing attacks have grown. Just the great sphere of cybersecurity has expanded, and that puts pressure on the limited personnel and the budgets as a whole. There's many things you probably want to get done in IAM today, and you can't because just not enough time, not enough budget, and that sort of thing. So that's another big factor weighing heavily on folks' minds. There are some new funding for AI and things like that, but outside of that, generally, really there's a security mindset and limited security budget, unfortunately. On top of that, you have commercial providers increasing their prices generally across the board that we've seen, but there's some big ones out there. A recent one was Google and Microsoft changing some terms. It used to be that folks would give alumni an email for life. Well, now that storage costs more and emails, licenses, and things like that cost more, many institutions are rethinking, do we really give alumni a school email for life? So that's something that people are rethinking. It's certainly changing the landscape from what it was. On top of all that, we have regulatory and compliance demands. So there's GDPR out of Europe. There's many other things out of Europe. They just passed or are going to pass another thing. It's been discussed in the media here about accessibility and that sort of thing. In the United States, we don't have all of that just yet, but FedRAMP does exist. And there's the state versions in Texas, for example, and others that are forcing oversight and accountability on things. If you don't have that, you always want to be, at least at the C level, you want to be on the state of the art, right? And you want to mitigate your risk as best as possible. So CISA has the zero trust maturity models out there. And we heard from TechX from a couple C level, there's a real struggle to stay on top of those maturity models and be the best that you can be. And that just that touches everything. We already know IAM touches everything, but these security requirements do touch everything. On top of that, you have 2026, the federal government has said all federal and state and local institutions need to have accessibility mandate. So all software has to be accessible. You can't get away with certain things you could before. So that's coming down the pike if you are related to or you are a state or local institution. And there are some exceptions there. I think it goes into 2027, but that also has been affecting things. And of course, more audits, dual price increases for MFA, and then just how we do our jobs differently since COVID. There's been a lot of commercial things going on, as well as maybe that person doesn't step into your campus. So we got to do digital and remote identity verification. So how do we accomplish these challenges? How do we work through these challenges? Next slide. And really, it is participate and collaborate in the InCommon community. It's a unique community, and higher ed has a great atmosphere of collaboration. Of course, they compete on certain things, but there's a collaboration here in the IAM and the cybersecurity type world. You can get hands-on learning at camp, you get technology exchange conferences, community exchange. There's actual training. So Internet 2 collates training for you in the TAP software. What is the TAP software? It's the InCommon Trusted Access Platform. It's a software curated by peer institutions of open source software that they've been using and others have been using for years, and continue to use and grow our knowledge and collection around. And so it's a great piece of software. You can use one or multiple components, and you certainly can integrate those components with commercial providers like Entra and others. So it's not a get everything or one type scenario. You get to work directly with software creators. Some of them are on this call, Evolveum. But also you have the software creators for Grouper and the others joining these meetings and listening to higher education and the features and the things that they need. There's even the collaborative success program. So that's where you work with peers and you kind of implement together and bootstrap yourself, get off the ground running. And of course, the learning and the other things. Next slide. And finally, what I love about is there's mailing lists and there's Slack channels specifically for higher ed and IAM and the challenges. And you can join governing boards in InCommon and certainly if you want to too. But there are the working groups. The working groups meet periodically, one's bi-weekly. They have various meetings, and we all discuss the challenges and the things and the items that you all are dealing with, and how other institutions are dealing with them, and what are some strategies to work through that and work towards the future. So I encourage you to learn more and join, and even if you don't use the software, we welcome everyone, those that want to use it, and those that want to talk about higher education and IAM. So that's it for me. And next speaker will be Mark.
Thank you, Paul. My name is Mark Rank. I'm Director of Product at Cirrus Identity. I'm going to talk about Federation proxies. You can go to the next slide. The trend that Cirrus and many others see is something called Federation proxies. And as Paul alluded to, how they can be useful in managing risk. Another more direct way of stating this is proxies are a tool to allow us to merge the old and the new to get things done. So next slide. Proxies themselves aren't new. The technology is certainly not new. For those that aren't familiar, one side of a proxy talks to an authentication source, an identity provider of some kind. The other side talks to a target application, a service provider or relying party. Proxy deployments are not new in the Federation. They've been used by the community for a number of years, and I've outlined a couple of the very typical use cases there. We can go to the next slide. What is new is proxies used to be frowned upon, but increasingly they're being embraced. And the reason they're being embraced is because they've demonstrated themselves to be very effective at integrating new technologies while maintaining existing deployments. And they just are a practical way of managing that complexity. They also come in two general flavors, and I'll talk briefly about those. Next slide. The first flavor I want to talk about are Federation adapters, and this is based on work that goes back several years in the community. And what a Federation adapter is often a proxy deployment that is serving up some kind of identity provider to the InCommon Federation. So you see the InCommon Federation is on the application side. And there's a couple links there for more information. Go to the next slide. The other flavor is what's called the Federation proxy. And this is an area of active work that's happening within the community. And in this scenario, InCommon is providing the authentication source, and then the proxy is on the application side. And that may be because you're aggregating a number of target applications. You have a mix of different protocols. You need to operate on the authentication statement before passing it on to the applications. Most importantly, the InCommon Technical Advisory Committee has a active working group on Federation proxies. And the last link on this slide is an open consultation, which is going on until the end of February on some work that was done last year. So I encourage folks to check that out. Next slide. So we're now going into some hand waving. So a quick safe harbor statement. These slides can be hypothetical. So for some folks, they may be actual, but we'll just call that out. Next slide, please. One of the biggest reasons why Cirrus Identity and me personally are interested in Federation proxies is there is an increasing amount of new next grade authentication tools, applications, new ways of addressing security. How do you deploy those technologies in a way that maintains active work, active deployments that have gone back decades in some cases? Proxying and the judicious use of proxying allows that kind of integration and that interplay in various scenarios, and while still holding the active deployments stable. And then finally, on the last slide, we will be talking next in the subsequent speakers about new technologies and new ways of deploying things. And we certainly want to support those. But what a proxy can do is provide a path to deploy those new patterns, those new deployments in ways that still maintain legacy kinds of applications, legacy kinds of authentication sources. And there's just a diagram there of a hypothetical with OpenID Federation, which Drew is going to talk about on the next section. So over to you, Drew.
Thanks, Mark. So I'm Drew Kavner. I'm a software engineer at OmniBond, and I'm also the co-chair of a working group within CACTI where we're focused on profiling the OpenID Federation specification for use in our community. Next slide. So the trend that I'm suggesting here is that more and more you're going to hear these words, OpenID Federation. So in the little bit of time that I have, I wanted to explain what they mean and why you're going to be hearing about them. Next slide, please. So what is OpenID Federation? There's a lot of different angles I could take to explain this. So I've tried to hit each of those in a bullet point here. So for one, OpenID Federation is a standard developed under the OpenID Foundation. But what it is functionally, or what it does, is it's a trust framework, trust management model, trust infrastructure, or whatever phrase you want to use to describe that. There's a lot of competing phrases out there. But basically what this means, it's a way for two entities to trust each other because they each trust the same third party. And the core enabling concept, which I'll explain a little later, is something called trust chains. Now, these last 2 points get into the importance of this. OpenID Federation may replace the current global research and education trust framework for multilateral SSO. So what we know as EduGain and InCommon, these things may have a new technical underpinning in the future, that being OpenID Federation. So with that in mind, this is something that could dramatically change the landscape of our community. And I hope that gives you enough incentive to listen as I explain it a bit more. Next slide, please. So what are trust chains? So the shortest way I can explain it is that trust chains are a way to create a flexible topology of trust using signed assertions. And I'm going to explain this using this visual as kind of an aid. So if you look at the key, these blue-green arrows represent signed assertions. The arrow starting at the issuer of that assertion and ending at the subject of that assertion. So let's take a hypothetical scenario. And before I get into the details of this, I'll add one caveat, which is that this topology is highly unlikely to be what we'll see in our community in the future. But I think it serves our purposes for learning about trust chains. So if you look at example SP1 on the left side of the visual here, and example University IDP over on the right side of the visual, these are two entities that don't know each other at all, but need to communicate. So how can we bootstrap trust between these two entities? We do that with trust chains. So if you imagine looking at the right side of the visualization, EduGain would sign an assertion saying that it trusts InCommon. Then InCommon would sign an assertion saying that it trusts example University. And example University signs an assertion saying it trusts its IDP. That's a trust chain. Now, on the other side, we also have a trust chain with EduGain attesting that it trusts example National Federation and example National Federation saying that it trusts example SP1. So now we have two trust chains. And these entities, example SP1 and example University IDP, can trust each other by traversing these trust chains back to their mutual trust anchor in EduGain. So that's how trust chains work. Next slide, please. So why leave our current approach? And this is, again, something you could take a lot of different angles on, but the way I would put it is that standards must be standard to work. And what I mean by standard is standard practice or widely adopted. And increasingly, XML and SAML, which our community relies on heavily to do this sort of trust work today, are becoming less and less standard. And this results in some problems. So one of these problems is an increasing lack of cryptographic agility. These standards aren't being maintained the way that we would like, meaning that in the future, as we need to move from one cryptographic algorithm to another to stay ahead of bad actors, we may not have that ability. We don't have a problem with this now, but it could be a challenge in the future. Also, our mechanisms for disseminating trusted metadata are not standard outside of our community. This is where we've seen a lot of practical problems on campuses. Large vendors are unresponsive to our unique need for metadata management because this is something that we uniquely do and we don't represent a huge part of their customer base. Also, open source projects that aren't a part of our community are similarly unresponsive, again, because this is such a unique need. So I hope you get the picture here that there are no insurmountable technical challenges, but there's an accumulation of human challenges that are arising because of the fact that these standards are not being used in broader industry. Next slide, please. So why go to OpenID Federation? Well, it gets us to use standards that are actually standard, or at least gives us that opportunity. So OpenID Federation puts us on a straightforward path to adopt a modern and well-maintained standard for our multilateral SSO use case. That standard being, of course, OpenID Connect. OpenID Federation also has emerging support in other communities. So there's an exciting possibility that OpenID Federation itself becomes a sort of broader standard outside of our community. This would allow us to get that support from vendors and open source. Work is also underway to use OpenID Federation as a backing trust framework for verifiable credentials, which gives us a promising path to support verifiable credentials in our community, which is something we've been eyeing for a while. And then I'm most excited about the chance to build bridges to other industries. Our campuses touch so many other industries, and the chance to build bridges of trust out of our campuses and into these other industries is really exciting, and I think could deliver a lot of value. Next slide, please. So if this is piquing your interest, what should you do about it? One of the things you could do is join the CACTI core working group that I'm co-chairing. We're especially in need of people with experience developing standards and profiles, but if you're not that person, don't let that deter you. You can email Nicole Roy to join, and then you can also just watch for updates from the working group. We're going to try to hit most of the major venues throughout the year. And then you can also contact the working group with any questions or concerns. And with that, I will turn the time over to Stefan.
Hi, folks. Stephen Fox here, Provision IAM. I'm a software engineer. Next slide, please. We're going to talk about the increasing use of artificial intelligence in research and higher education. Artificial intelligence has become really more pervasive over the last couple of years with the advent of high compute capabilities from the GPUs that you get from NVIDIA and other vendors. Next slide. So how is it being used right now? And I've just kind of tried to focus it down on how higher ed and research institutions might be using artificial intelligence in identity and access management. And one of the things that you'll see if you're not actually implementing any of that stuff in your own institution, you probably are going to find that the vendors that you're using, especially cloud service vendors, are using AI extensively, and some of the functions that you've seen before that work kind of, now it's getting better with the use of artificial intelligence. So some of those uses might be risk-based authentication, anomaly and fraud detection, identity verification, threat intelligence and predictive analytics, and compliance and audit automation. So with risk-based authentication, you're going to find that some cloud service vendors are making risk level assessments at login time. So you may find that one day it's working great, and the next day they want a little bit more from you. Artificial intelligence agents can take a look at logs and make analysts monitor for patterns and detect unusual activities. With identity verification, you're going to find that we're using biometrics. Folks are asking you to upload your identity document. They want to take a picture, for example, to enter a building to see if you're alive. You can't just. And some predictive analytics, we're seeing AI taking use of pattern recognitions. They might be suggesting mitigation methods for you. And doing zero-day analysis. Again, analyzing audit logs is something that AI can use to do things like comply with audits for regulatory requirements and making policy recommendations based on risks and standards. Next slide, please. So what's the future in identity of artificial intelligence in identity and access management? One of the prompts that I got when we were preparing the slide is what's forcing it? And I think that there are certain forcing functions. One of the forcing functions might be the increased incidence of identity theft. Not identity theft itself, that they're actually stealing your identity, but they're stealing your identity data so that an attempt can be made. We're seeing things like younger students are more, they're more able to use technology because it's easier than what was there before. Another reason might be the cost of being able to use artificial intelligence. I mean, the cost is going really way down. So how would we use it? Well, we think that biometrics and multi-factor authentication is going to be more prevalent in the future. AI will refine adaptive authentication, where access levels dynamically adjust based on risk factors like your location, the device you're using, and your behavior. We're doing zero trust security models now just because there's so much data that's being stolen. It's easier and easier to impersonate you. So this is why folks that are highly sensitive to the security risks are going to ask you for multi-factor authentication. They might want to take your picture. Anomaly detection and threat prevention. AI will enable automated responses to security threats and reduce manual intervention. And it will also enable predictive analytics to bring out zero-day threats that somebody hadn't thought about before. I'll end with an experience that I had at the airport. You know that at the TSA is now making it optional for you to use biometrics. They want to take your picture and match it up to some database and even match it up to which flight you're taking. Now, if you object, if you say, hey, I don't want to have my picture taken, what you might find is that you're going through a lot more, how would you say, a lot more checks than you did before biometrics was available. Next speaker.
Thank you, Stefan. Hello, everyone. My name is Simona, and I'm Business Development Representative at Evolveum, creator of Midpoint. And I will talk about a key trend in IGA, AI-powered role mining and outlier detection. Next slide, please. Oh, we can go to the next one. Thanks. So I would like to talk about let your data work for you. What does it really mean? So organizations already have lots of identity data, the user information, access rights, and application roles. And often IT departments or even individual teams manage access manually. But with role mining and outlier detection, you can make better use of this data to simplify identity governance for your organization. Role mining and outlier detection analyzes existing access patterns and suggests optimizations. So, for example, if 20 people have the same set of permissions, it might suggest creating a new role for you. If one person has unusual access rights, it can flag them for review. Importantly, this type of AI does not hallucinate. It doesn't invent information or make autonomous decisions. It just simply processes real existing data that you have, and it presents logical recommendations to a human being to decide what to do next. Then the role mining is a powerful way to identify common access patterns across users. It looks at application roles and access rights to group users logically based on similar permissions. suggests role structures, helping organizations clean up and optimize role management. Also, it speeds up onboarding as new systems can inherit and refine existing roles rather than starting from scratch with each. And it can also continuously improve business roles by analyzing them over time and simplifying them iteratively. Right now, role mining is underutilized, but organizations can benefit greatly from periodic analysis to keep access rights relevant and minimal for them. There is also an outlier detection. So while role mining finds common patterns, outlier detection does quite the opposite. It highlights unusual access rights that may indicate misconfigurations or security risks even. This can help organizations to lower their attack surface by identifying and revoking excessive permissions that were never removed before. And also it can detect misconfigurations. So someone has their rights set in the wrong way, and this helps to find the wrong pattern in your configuration. While it won't catch everything, it can significantly reduce risk by flagging the most suspicious rights for your review. Next slide, please. So smart data processing, not a language model. What this means is that we often hear about AI in the form of large language models, but Midpoint, for example, takes a different approach with role mining and outlier detection. It leverages AI for big data analysis rather than natural language processing. It's efficient, relevant, and energy conscious. It's already available in the product, so you can really use it, even though the demo environments may have limited data, but it's usable there. And also there is a future that it will evolve over time. And Evolveum is open to exploring language models in the future for more advanced recommendations for your environment employing this AI models. Thank you. So I would like to give word to Zach now.
Hi, my name is Zach Adams, and I am a senior IAM architect with Instrumental Identity. And today I'm going to be talking with you all about artificial intelligence, what it is and what it isn't. So next slide, please. So one of the trends that we've been seeing is that AI is being portrayed as this black box inside a walled garden, and that AI service providers want to make you think that you need a data center to get into AI, and that AI can solve every single problem out there. This is dangerous, though, as that kind of creativity is stifled with this new technology, and exploration is in a way discouraged, which is key to identifying potential threats with the new technology. Next slide, please. So for your 20th intro into what AI is so far in 2025, we're going to cover a little bit about what AI actually is. So whenever we're talking about AI, it's a blanket term for a set of technologies implemented in a system to enable reasoning, learning, and action to solve a complex problem. And there's two primary types of AI that we'll talk about. The one that Evolveum was actually just touching on is what we would call more of machine learning, which is a concrete method of doing data prediction, classification, and producing possible decisions based on existing data right there. Now, it uses a variety of different training methods like basic linear regression models, all the way up to the latest and greatest being deep learning neural networks. Now, generative AI is the latest, hottest thing on the market right now. Now, generative AI is working by creating new content based on patterns learned from existing data. So it's a little bit more creative, a little bit more fluid, and it's created using that same neural network that I mentioned, using methods such as generative adversarial networks. And the difference between these two here is that machine learning is generally auditable. You can track and see how the machine learning algorithm got to its final outcome versus generative AI. It seems kind of mystical. You can't really pull out why it came to a particular conclusion in regards to whenever you have to do an audit on a particular decision there. So machine learning is a lot more concrete, but it's also harder to train due to the data requirements that are needed in order to make those decisions there. AI is a little bit easier to train, but it's prone to creativity and hallucinations. And this is the official term for it too. But because of that, it requires less training data, and it can actually use fake training data generated by other AI models. So you can kind of think of machine learning as the precursor to AI, generative AI, with a shared ancestor in deep learning. And for machine learning, some of the applications that you'll see are things like role modeling, weather forecast, biometric scanning, old school Apple Siri. For generative AI, you guys already know about OpenAI's offerings. Facebook's Llama family, which is it's a group of open source AI models that you can run locally or in a data center. And then going back to Apple Intelligence, its recent generative AI offering. Now, what's really made this AI boom come to life is the come around of transformers, which is a neural network, not the robots in disguise. But basically what transformers did was it was a way for symbolic data, words, ideas, to be translated into numerical data. So it condenses things down to these numerical values, which allow you to train these models easier and actually run them in a lot more limited environment. The latest and greatest thing that's came out the last couple of weeks has been DeepSeek's model and some of the other multi-model AIs that you see that can go from text to images. Next slide, please. Oh, actually, real quick. One thing that I want to have you guys remember here is creativity leads to hallucinations, and hallucinations lead to bad information and leave you open to attacks. Transformers and tokens, like I said, allow for smaller models that could be ran locally and trained easier or retrained. And then finally, that SaaS giants will make you think that they're the only ones capable of running these models and training them. All right, next slide. Okay, so what is AI not, or what AI isn't? So AI is not the same as artificial general intelligence. So artificial general intelligence is whenever it knows basically all the wealth of human knowledge, whenever it can do basically everything that a human can do. The fact of the matter is that AI is not a silver bullet to every problem. It's simply another tool, and it can be used for good or for bad. And as companies begin to use this technology within their infrastructure stack, some issues kind of begin to arise. And as everybody depends on it, those issues can kind of compound and become even more dangerous. So one of those large issues is hallucinations. So hallucinations are whenever the AI model produces data that is completely incorrect. And it's not that it's giving you an incorrect answer, but the model, in a sense, kind of believes the information that it is spewing out to you. It remembers the context in a lot of scenarios. So to give you an example of this, let's say a junior developer goes to ask an AI how to do something like implement a simple web framework like Flask, which leads to the implementation of maybe a vulnerability into that web app, like maybe running in debug mode permanently instead of production mode. This is because there's no critical thought that's being gone into play whenever people trust these AI models here. And then with this AI model being trained on company data, that same junior dev may be given sensitive information like production credentials and information for your organization or an entirely different organization's information. So how do you even do data security with an AI model whenever it's been trained on all of this data from many different organizations? And keeping on that topic of software as a service, AI providers, and other orgs' data, one of the other issues that I've seen is that as you onboard these applications, they're using your data to train their own larger models, even after sanitizing your data and sensitive information. The thing is that we don't know everything that's inside of that transformer model, that neural network. It's based upon layer and layer and layer of different pieces of information. And so the thing is, though, at the same time, having a larger model as an attempt to get more accurate results doesn't always work. Bigger isn't always better. And for that reason, the the issue is that we're losing more and more security with these models here. So that same junior dev, let's say they decide to go use ChatGPT instead of the company Copilot instance. Well, in that particular scenario, you're going through and sharing all your information to OpenAI directly, which means that everybody on the internet could possibly grab your information there. Now, for some other more directed security threats, there's also prompt engineering, which is where you can intentionally give information into your prompt to the AI to get it to spew out sensitive data to you by tricking it. And bad actors are now starting to do the same kind of thing to create basically ChatGPT for hackers, where it can do these sophisticated attacks using multimodal AI models. Next slide, please. So these are just a few of the symptoms here that we've seen. And, the first thing that we need to figure out is, how do we find a solution to this, and how do we even diagnose the problem? Well, we find that building our own AI systems and self-hosting as the best way to discover these vulnerabilities here. Next slide, please. For hallucinations in particular, at Instrumental Identity, we actually have some tooling around analyzing our client repositories and also doing log aggregation and log parsing during our CI/CD deployments. And basically, we're using really small models with a thing called RAG pipelines to prevent hallucinations and give factual info. I mean, at the end of the day, though, the tool itself, AI, its main purpose is to try to help and be a supplementary piece rather than the end-all silver bullet that I mentioned before. And then next slide. I apologize for going over here, but I also have one quick live demo that I will share with you guys. And this is something that we can actually, you guys can download here after the call today. But what I have here is a simple AI application here. Basically, I'm using what's called Ollama as a local service provider for AI functionality, as well as a Python framework known as LangChain. And with 36 lines of code, we're able to basically create a small kind of chat bot here. So I'll go ahead and show you this right here. And this model that we're using is that HIT AI model called DeepSeek R1. This is the one that recently blew all the other models out of the water, developed by a Chinese crypto mining company. It's been kind of controversial in that people use the online version of it, which is transferring data directly to their company. And, those are stored in Chinese data centers there. But one of the things that you'll see with like Chinese models, and let's go ahead and abstract this out to say a company's data. Chinese models will generally try to lock down certain information, such as the Tiananmen Square protests that occurred in 1989. So if I try to ask about, that particular event here, excuse me real quick. You'll see that it's not going to output any kind of information here because of the data security that was put in place. Now, if I go through and I uncomment this prompt injection line, this will remove any of the safeguards in place. This is only a couple lines of communication here that's going over to the AI model. So if we go ahead and we run that now, and we ask the exact same question, but with this prompt injection in place, you'll see here that we've been able to get around the guards that were put in place with factual information here. But that's not all. Through this prompt injection, it can actually induce further hallucinations. In this case, I have another run that I had done right before this call, actually, and you can see within the thinking parameters here that it actually started to hallucinate in Chinese. So these are just one of the many problems with generative AI models that we're just now starting to find, and we don't necessarily know what all this is capable of. What's most important is that we have a place where we can safely explore and find what these vulnerabilities are and try to come up with solutions for them. But with that, thank you guys very much for your time here today. I'll make sure to post the link to this repository in our chat here.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Zach, and thank you, everybody, for your contributions there. This has been really interesting stuff. We're certainly open to taking questions using the Q&A feature down on the bottom of your bar. But I mean, one question I have is, we see, Zach's demo of using the DeepSeek language model. There's so many different language models out there, so many companies competing in this AI space. I'd really like to hear from our panelists about how institutions can, pick tomorrow's winners today. We don't want to be choosing AI vendors that, may be bought out or go out of business. What are institutions to do?
Institutions, especially universities, are in a really unique position in that they generally have GPU compute resources already available in their data center, usually for higher education purposes, computer science labs and whatnot. But on that previous slide where you saw all of the icons there, those are actually links to various AI-centric websites, and the biggest one being Hugging Face. Hugging Face is the GitHub for AI. Basically, they allow you to download various different open source models from, say, Facebook, from Google, and you can test it out yourself. They also do kind of these arena matches between the different models where you can actually see the efficacy rates between each vendor's open source offerings. And that kind of gives you a clue in on what the closed source offerings are like there. But with universities, especially, you guys have a unique ability in that you could potentially run some of these models on your own and keep your data all inside, especially whenever you're already in like a research engagement with maybe confidential or sensitive information. There's no way that you can be, sending that up to OpenAI servers. But just a little thought on that there.
Well, thank you, Zach. Do any of our other panelists have thoughts on that subject of how to choose the right AI for you?
I think that the simplifications that are out there right now, the trend this year that a lot of the AI vendors are into is what they call it agentic AI, where you're allowing the AI to perform a particular service on your behalf. One of the things I think might be very useful to higher ed in the identity and access management phase would be to allow the AI to analyze your logs and give some recommendations on how you can either improve your application stack, improve the security, or giving you some anomaly detection.
I guess I'll jump in, James, and respond to your question with maybe a slightly different one. Irrespective of what AI tools are used, do we see emerging or widely identified use cases for AI? I think part of the answer to your question, James, may be what is the problem that is trying to be solved and how people are effectively doing it.
And then I guess I can jump in if you're looking for an answer how to pick the next winner. Following on Mark's question is you got to have a good use case for it. If you want to explore it, certainly, right? But there is no problem to wait and see. If your current security model, your current IAM governance and everything is set up appropriately, you can just wait and see, explore these tools. And then as winners, quote unquote, emerge in the coming years here, you can always jump to one. But I don't think, unless you have a clear need or use case that you can define, that you aren't losing anything by not deploying them either.
Another question we have is, I guess for Drew, really. Would love to hear some specific use case examples of how OIDF can support like new workflows, like through verifiable credentials. Like what are the industries you see linking to? And how would they affect end users?
Sure. So, I mean, something that's been discussed a lot in the working group is academic credentials, you know, records of course completion, diplomas, these sorts of things. These frequently have to pass between the boundaries of different institutions and organizations, whether it's, you know, a student transferring from one school to another and needing to bring their credit with them, or a student going to an employment situation where you know, their educational history needs to be verified, something like an engineer being licensed as a professional engineer, or something like that. So yeah, I mean, OpenID Federation is a very general purpose trust infrastructure that different things can be layered on top of. And so verifiable credentials is one of those things. So you could imagine a scenario where OpenID Federation, you could imagine a scenario where OpenID Federation becomes the backing framework for verifiable credentials that transmit that academic credential data. So that's one.
Well, thank you. I think that's a great example. We have a question from Clay here, really for anyone. Are you aware of any on-prem logging solutions that can provide AI-based insights of issues or risky behavior?
Well, I would say that there's a lot of the commercial solutions actually are starting to provide AI-based analysis of logs, like such as Splunk, IBM, QRadar, Elastic, Search, Graylog. So it's basically your vendor. I mean, if you ask your vendor that is actually storing logs, what they can do for you, then you can take advantage. Sometimes it's going to be an add-on service. You might pay a little bit extra per month to take advantage of it.
Yeah, I suspect we may have time for one more question here from Nadeem. What are the key challenges and opportunities in using AI-powered technologies for IAM in higher education? So really specific to higher education, challenges and opportunities, if you were to sum it up.
I think
I can say, at least for our use cases, you know, it kind of goes back to that log parsing that we go through and do. Usually with university IAM teams, for example, it can be very difficult to read through every single log statement that comes through whenever you're actually doing a deployment. AI can be used to try to catch, you know, those errors that are going through after, you know, however many hundreds of lines have already passed through. It automates the boring stuff. That's what you can use AI for. The hallmark of a good algorithm too is not that it's 100% right. It's just that if it can get it, you know, at least half the time, then that's a win right there.
I think some of the challenges that you're going to have with implementing is going to be cost and technology. You know, you may have some software that's already embedded, that's been there a long time. Switching it out might be, you know, changing the status quo. There'll be some resistance there. And I think another item is going to be privacy. You know, some folks just don't want you to take their picture. They don't want to give you their fingerprint. But on the other end of it, I think some of the younger people will be like, you know, this is much easier. You mean I don't have to carry this card around? I could just use my finger. I can, you look in my eyes and you enter a building.
I
Great,
also
thank
think
you.
that one of the challenges might be integration with legacy systems within universities, but also when you choose the right platform for your IGA and you go from there, you can have better user experience, improvements, and also automation.
Great. Well, thank you, everybody. Any other closing thoughts from any of our panelists here? No, I think, Gene, we can send it back to you.